Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Sloan, and I'm the president of the Northwest Ceramics Foundation. And I'd like to welcome you all to our presentation with Eliza Au. But first, we have some housekeeping. The Northwest Ceramics Foundation is grateful for and acknowledges it operates on land that is the unceded, shared traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. We stand in solidarity with all communities marginalized due to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or age, and commit ourselves to opposing racism in all its forms. For those not currently on our mailing list, please go to our website, www.nwcf.ca. On the top of every page, there is a blue button. You click on that, please sign into on the forums. You will receive emails about all our upcoming events, and all our events are free. On another point, we're very pleased to announce the applications for the Museum of Anthropology Ceramic Artist in Residence program, supported by both the Northwest Ceramics Foundation and our board member, Carol Mayer, are now open. The deadline is April 15th. Please see the MOA website or check in the chat function for the link to the application form. For the duration of the talk, please mute yourselves and please turn off your videos. This will improve the transmission. At the end of the talk, we hope to have a nice discussion period during which you can please turn back your video and your chat if you wish to talk, or you can type questions into the chat function. This talk is being recorded, and it'll be put up on our website in a few days or a week to join all the other talks that are already there for your pleasure to watch. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Eliza Au. Eliza was born and raised in Richmond, British Columbia, Canada, and she is currently the assistant professor of ceramics at the University of North Texas. Eliza earned her BFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and her MFA from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University. She has shown her work, which uses digital fabrication techniques nationally and internationally. Eliza has attended residencies at the European Ceramic Works Center, the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts, and the Greenwich House Pottery, In 2020, Eliza received an award of excellence during the Chrysalis competition held by the James Rennick Alliance. And in 2022, she received the McKnight Artist Fellowship to attend a residency at the Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis. Eliza's work is in several permanent collections, including the Everson Museum of Art and the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Please welcome Eliza Au.
Great. Can you hear me okay? Hopefully. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, so I just want to start off and say thank you to the Northwest Ceramics Foundation, and obviously to Deborah, and then also to Amy as well, and everybody else that made this possible. So it really is an honor to do this talk again for this organization, because I believe that I did this talk for the NWCF in about 2010 now, I think. So that was, like 15 years ago. So obviously, like, a lot of things have changed. So my name is Eliza Au. You can say Eliza. That's how it's grammatically correctly said. So that's totally acceptable as well. So I am a ceramic artist who actually works with a lot of digital techniques to make my work. So, this is actually a show at Greenwich House Pottery that you're looking at right now, where there was a whole series of bricks that were on like 5 podiums that you could kind of like look through. But that was actually the title of my actual talk was also the name of this show. Okay. So I'll just do a little bit of a kind of like an introduction of who I am, though some people I think I know on this talk are kind of familiar with who I am and what I do. So I was actually born in Vancouver, British Columbia. And then after that, actually, I moved around to a lot of different places, including near Toronto for a little bit, and then also in Singapore for probably less than a year. So, I moved all around, and then I lived in Prince George for, I think about 4 years, and then I came back to Richmond when I was 10, and most of my early life was actually right where it was there. But my parents actually, they immigrated from Hong Kong to Canada probably in the late 60s. So me and my brother were really raised there. So the majority of my younger life was there. So usually I talk a little bit about Vancouver, but since like you're in Vancouver right now, I don't have to like go into that. But obviously, it's a community that has like a lot of Asian influence and a lot of people from Asia, particularly China, living there. So this is my house now. So I live about 20 minutes south of Denton. That's where the university that I teach at, which I've been at for about almost 6 years now. And so this is our house here with our one of our cats. So we do have two cats now. So me and my husband moved here 6 years ago, obviously because I got a job at the University of North Texas. So we've had a very enjoyable time here, and we've gone through kind of many different kind of life things, and obviously COVID and things like that. But different change of life, obviously, than the West Coast. So this is like my two honeys right now. I do have two cats. The left one is a big boy Kuya, and the one on the right is a little girl. It's Paprika. So that was a big thing for me to have cats for the first time in my whole life because I've been moving all around, North America, but also I lived in China for 2 years as well. So getting into my work is actually overlap of pattern, architecture, and then also technology. So in terms of architecture, I look at a lot of sacred spaces. So like mosques, temples, and then also churches. So not necessarily very cultural specific, but I look at kind of like universal aspects between all of them. Patterns, so particularly repeating patterns, such as like an Islamic pattern. So how pattern like really takes a lot of influence from natural kind of elements, obviously like leaves and kind of scrolls and things like that. But the idea that kind of pattern is some sort of mimicry of nature. Technology is also a really big player in my work. So in terms of like making a lot of repeating patterns and making repeating patterns that are technically like clones of each other, and then also on a larger scale, technology really allows me to do that. So I'll talk about it more a little later on, but I do a lot of, CAD, which is computer aided design, using the software Rhino, and then also 3D printing as well. So just more of my influences here are things to kind of think about. The idea that kind of ornamentation and structure is really one and the same. So some of these things that you see, you might not actually consider to be ornamental. So something like scaffolding or perhaps like a truss for a bridge. You can see that there is a molecule as well. So all of those are like lattice forms. And then the one on the bottom right, you can see like there is Islamic patterns. So the idea that, structure and ornamentation can be really one and the same thing, though we don't think about, scaffolding being very ornamental. They're all kind of integrated and related together in some sort of way. So you'll see kind of later on, and when you look at my work, the idea of kind of the lattice structure really being like, the pattern and the ornamentation being one and the same thing, and it cannot be separated. And that's actually a theme that kind of really runs through my work, because we often think that ornamentation needs to be placed onto something. As technically decoration, it's not very useful. It's really just there to look at. But really, I make the argument that, ornamentation is a very essential thing to the actual structural element of the piece, but also the aesthetic as well. So more about my research, looking at the 5 Bravai lattices. So you can see on the left here. So that's the idea that, all patterns can actually be analyzed with these 5 Rabi lattices. So each of these points really designate where like a certain motif will be placed. So that idea of kind of structure and kind of placement as this kind of underlying kind of method of designing is very interesting to me. So you can see on the right here, that one motif has been, repeated and, kind of turned around or kind of like made it kind of parallel or, alternating in some ways to really make an infinite amount of pattern. So I like to always put this slide in, and this is actually one of the first pieces that I did at Emily Carr. And I forget which class it was. It was a beginning class. And it was a clay box, which I, cut a lid out, and the lid kind of slides in and out, and it was raku fired. And then I put a face behind that. So, thinking about, really right at the beginning of your art career, because I like started at Emily Carr right out of high school. So, I just went right into, kind of thinking about an art career. Like something like this, almost has this kind of echoes of what I make now. So sometimes like, earlier on when you're starting, you're interested in something, you don't know why, it's very subconscious, but it's something like a thread that really you keep on doing, 25 years later. So, I like to kind of see this kind of the impetus of, what I do now. More kind of influences, Islamic art is really a huge, huge influence for me. So the idea of using pattern and decoration to represent the divine versus, having figural, like, faces and people to represent that type of content. So, you can see that, there's a lot of floral motifs, the use of color, and it's very kind of grand. If you were to stand under this dome, you could feel really the height and then the complexity and really look at it and kind of get lost in it. More kind of influences the Ely Cathedral. So this idea of kind of height and light and kind of repetition, really in a way to kind of evoke this idea of kind of solitude or awe, and then also obviously ideas of divinity. Carl Jung, he had his patients actually do some drawing. So the idea of kind of the mandala, and nobody told them like, what to do. So it was very subconscious that they started drawing these type of drawings. So you can obviously see they're circular. They're very mandala-like, this idea of kind of coming into some sort of focus as well. So also ornamentation in modern architecture as well. So this is a man called Evan Douglas, who is a contemporary architect. So I'm really interested how, like in modern day times, architects and artists are really using historical pattern and kind of changing it in some way and putting it into a contemporary context. So you can see on the bottom, this idea of having this like lattice screen and this like very utopic kind of rendering, this idea of people kind of passing in and out, and obviously that's very like exotic kind of structure. So, the idea of kind of the lattice form or this kind of membrane form is still really prevalent in our culture, but, that kind of idea or kind of concept behind it is kind of changed. It's still like, in a way, quote unquote, like a sacred space, but it's not really associated with any type of religion. More kind of work from contemporary artists who do use digital fabrication in their work. And some of you might be familiar with these two artists. One is Michael Eden, who is on the left, and then right is Chris White. So both of them use digital fabrication in a way to actually represent historical forms. So Michael Eden, the pink vase on the left, really evokes a sort of like historical Wedgwood form. And then the one on the right, obviously, is the Portland vase as well. So this was actually a piece that was really super influential for me. It's by a man called Marek Zakula, who is actually Israeli artist slash designer. And so what was really incredibly interesting to me was that, he used the three-dimensional form, which were these plates, and then laid them out and then put a two-dimensional design like a decal over all of them. So it was really interesting to me how he kind of like went between the 2D and the 3D. And so also working with like, positive and negative space as well. So there was all these kind of elements that really made this come together as one kind of cohesive piece. So the idea that kind of two-dimensional and three-dimensional can come together in some ways is actually like still very much in my work as well. But also this kind of relationship to flatness and using flatness, by making planes to create a 3D form really is something that I'm interested in. Oops, sorry. Okay. So here's a few questions, that I think about in my work, and I'm not going to read all of them. But, a few things is that, how does working digitally change the dialogue between traditional and contemporary craft? So, the fact that, we have things like, CNC machines or 3D printers, laser engravers, some people might be familiar with all these machines, but that, idea of kind of cutting into material to make a form, or like, squeezing it out like plastic and building it up kind of like toothpaste. So kind of adding material or subtracting material to create form really, speaks to a certain type of aesthetic. So, you can think about digital technology a little bit like hand building or throwing, there's a very much an aesthetic related to that. So obviously if you throw on the wheel, there's throwing rings, right? And versus hand building, right? Obviously they're flat kind of planes as well. So, the digital kind of tool makes its own marks as well. So, this idea of like, technically a quote unquote, like kind of perfect form or the ability to kind of like replicate it. Some of these techniques obviously do have the lines of the 3D printer as well. So, all those things really need to be considered when working digitally, because obviously you choose the tool that you want to use to create a certain aesthetic result. Okay. So this is a few readings, you guys can totally take a screenshot or something like that if you want to like look at this. But I just like to have this slide up to, kind of reference a few sort of readings or articles that I have looked at before. Actually, some of them are a few from Amy, thank you, who had referenced them to me as well. So, one of them was actually Michael Hahn's book, Symbol, Pattern, and Symmetry, which is really interesting because it talks about how pattern kind of evolves through time and trade and different kind of cultures. So I think that, it has happened and it's still happening now. So, I mean, the perfect thing to kind of describe that is the idea of kind of the blue and white style. Obviously, it started in China, right? And then it moved to Europe. And it was still blue and white, but obviously they were changing it with a different sort of imagery and patterns and kind of motifs. So the interesting idea is like, pattern and ornamentation is something that is not static. It's always changing, and people are putting their own cultural meanings really on to that as well. So also, the use of obviously the first reading here, David Pye's, mold making, kind of 3D printing. So using the ideas of kind of jigs or molds to produce, objects with more sort of uniformity. Because I do with 3D printing and also mold making, there's this idea of repetition and also the modules. So, thinking about those ideas, but also thinking about kind of authenticity and kind of originality, kind of what those kind of questions come in as well are really important too. So more about the kind of arabesque. So that's actually a theme that runs through my work. So, you can think about it kind of in the broader sense, obviously in writing, in dance, and kind of you can see the William Morris kind of wallpaper here. So the idea of kind of the curved line being like, a metaphor for nature, but also, this idea of like really like a movement or kind of a flow is really interesting to think about that in terms of relation to like the pattern motif. So getting into this work here, this is actually really early work. So kind of my trajectory was that I started at Emily Carr And then I transferred to Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, where I actually finished my undergrad. And so this was my senior show. So you had the opportunity to actually apply to the Anna Leonowens Gallery for like, to put up a show as such. So, I made some work that was actually based on the crossing tower. So when you went into a cathedral and you looked up, there was like a window basically on the ceiling. So I was interested in actually, transforming that experience into a series of ceramic plates. So this was the one on the floor, kind of went and looked down on it. Sorry. Um, I know I have to use my mouse to go from slide to slide, so it kind of jumps a little bit. And so, the other ones, were on the wall, and you could kind of like look forward, like into these kind of crossing towers or rose kind of windows as well. So this was actually a big turning point for me because it was like, the ability to kind of focus and make like a large body of work, especially like coming from undergrad, you're doing like many kind of small things. And now it was like just a really, really focused time and planning to make this work. So this work was also the time, like, when I first started working really seriously with modules, and basically, many different parts that made a whole. Because obviously you can't make something like, 10 feet out of ceramic and put it in the kiln. It's very difficult. So, this is also like, out of necessity that I had to work in this manner. Sorry. So after actually NASCAD, I went to Kohler to do an internship with the arts industry program. And actually, I would suggest that to anyone actually who would be interested in learning more about molds. I think it was about 2 months. And you get to work with the arts industry program who has like a kind of spot on the factory floor. I don't know exactly what it's like now because it's been more than a decade. But the interns do assist the artists, the resident artists that are there. And then also you get to make your own work as well. But just seeing really what clay was like for, just regular people, like a job. They would come in and fill in the molds in the morning. Around noon, they would like, dump them. Actually, they dumped them out of probably after like 15 minutes. And then they'd wait for them to dry and then they'd take them out and have them out of the molds by probably early afternoon. So seeing kind of the molds, like how they made the molds, how they made the models, this whole sort of process was a really big learning experience for me. And I think it influenced me a great deal later on. After that, I did a few things, but I also did a residency at the Museum of Contemporary Craft in Oregon, Portland. And that museum is not around anymore. But there, actually, I did a large scale installation piece. So I made like, hundreds of these porcelain bricks and created an environment that you could actually walk into. So the idea of, placing the viewer within like an architectural space was really interesting to me. So at the time, actually, Hurricane Katrina had actually hit the States. And this work was actually about that. So the idea of kind of being within the eye of the storm and being in the center of this chaos and somehow staying really centered, like kind of mentally and also physically, was part of this piece. So that was me probably, I don't know, over a decade ago, a long time ago now. So that was me actually working in a little hut that actually was just down the hill from the museum. So I lived there also, and I made all of these porcelain bricks as well. So a lot about making, these larger installations is that, you have to do like a lot of planning and a lot of kind of trial and error. And it's like, you work so long to actually get a result, that it's a really long period of time before you actually see the result and you get through the whole kind of learning process. So actually, it's interesting to kind of look at this right now because I'm working on actually a large installation piece right now. And so everything, builds up on each other. Like you learn something from every single piece that you make. And it builds onto the next thing that you do. So it's very interesting to see this, which was, I don't know, probably over 10 years ago, and all the kind of mistakes and the things I could have done better as well. So after that, I went to Alfred University to do my graduate degree. And that was a really interesting time of my life. Before that, I was very much doing like slip casting and mold making. And so that was the kind of work that I did going into Alfred. And then, at Alfred, actually, I spent one semester like not doing clay, which was kind of interesting. I actually worked with metal, and then I also worked with glass, but also doing mold making in both of those different mediums. So that was actually a really good time for me to be kind of experimental, but also to be grounded because, thinking about my identity as a mold maker and how that idea of the mold could be translated into different mediums. And it's also that each you can see here they're doing metal casting, ceramic shell, and also sand casting here. Uh, People that work in glass and people that work in metal as well, they have their own ways of really looking at the medium and kind of like working with it, similar to like how we are ceramic people. And then, we have certain ideas and kind of attitudes towards clay. So they have, those same types of attitudes as well towards their material. So it was really great to see, this sort of process. And also what's very interesting to see my actual ceramic forms or prototypes in that different material as well. So this was actually my graduating show. So, it's actually made out of paper and it's on a metal kind of plate. And there's actually ceramic tiles which have kind of a like metal washers behind it. So the back part behind all that paper, it's almost like a refrigerator door. So you could actually like move those tiles around. So this idea of kind of having this method to really, be variable in some ways and work with like complex patterns in an easy way on the wall, that was kind of my idea behind this. Also the use of paper in this work really came about because when I started graduate school, I was using paper as like a model. So I was like cutting out these things that looked like paper snowflakes, and then I was layering them up. And the paper was almost this like stand-in for clay. But my advisor at that time said, clay and paper obviously are completely different mediums. Paper, obviously it's floppy, it's thin. So it wasn't like, a direct one-to-one kind of thing that you could like look at and say, oh, this paper thing is going to be this clay thing, right? But paper really became part of the actual work. It's kind of installed when it's installed, even if it's installed in a symmetrical way, the gravity actually like makes the paper kind of sag and kind of have this sort of like sinuous sort of line. So it technically is symmetrical, but gravity makes it basically asymmetrical in some way. After that, grad school, I went home and I was back to Vancouver and I was there for kind of about 5 years, kind of on and off doing different things. I did work like a few like, regular jobs as well in that time. But yeah, a lot of like, smaller jobs, like smaller residencies. And so it was a time where I was doing a lot of different things and living at home. So I did get to do a residency with the Corning Museum of Glass, probably about 1 year after I graduated. So the idea of, making this glass carpet with two kind of different colored glass that are overlapping each other. I still have that piece in my garage back at home. This idea is called the fragility of belief. So the idea, that this prayer carpet, if you would step on it, it would shatter. So, this idea and making this, somehow glass a metaphor for human belief, is kind of interesting. So making that parallel. This is actually a little bit of my process. Really early on, actually, when I started working with CAD, it doesn't really look like I'm working with CAD here, but I just really use CAD to make a drawing. And then I put that drawing under some clear tape, and then I just used it to, carve pieces of plaster, which I made a mold, two-piece mold of, and then I used wax. You can see on the top there to multiply those pieces and join it together. So I could get basically a symmetrical, non-round form. So obviously I was very interested in this wrought iron kind of, look, this kind of diamond kind of extrusion as well. But this really allowed me to make kind of forms that were symmetrical without the 3D printer. So on the bottom right, you can see here me making those plaster silicone molds for the glass piece that I just showed. So more about actually Rhino CAD. If anyone is interested, or perhaps they've done it before, but basically like computer aided design, that's what CAD is. And I've been using Rhino probably since 2005. So when I graduated from NASCAD, I came home to Vancouver and I got a grant. It was a small grant from, I forget exactly what organization it was, but I did about 1 week to learn the introduction for Rhino. And that is actually my only kind of formal training that I've ever done with CAD. So all the rest of it is like, I've just did it by myself, did YouTube videos and things like that. I just really learn what I need because obviously CAD can be very complex. There's a lot of things that I don't know how to do in the software. So it really was like a learning process over time. But this is actually a piece that I did for the Gardner Museum when I was nominated for there was the, I think, People's Choice RBC award. Actually, Amy had nominated me, so that was a really, great time to actually make a very, ambitious type of piece. So the rendering that you see here, I originally modeled like part of the piece and then I like mirrored it and replicated it and made the kind of image that you can see on the top right? So, this idea of kind of like these three kind of planes coming together to create this very like elaborate kind of piece that was like stacking as well. So CAD really allowed me to make extremely complicated renderings or visualizations. So I really think about this as a sketchbook. Obviously I cannot draw this by hand. It would take me forever, and it certainly would not be accurate. So this like idea of kind of using the computer as a visualization tool, especially for very large, complex things, made my life like a whole lot easier, and made my kind of like, brainstorming process a lot more better. So I continue to work with CAD because of this reason. So this is actually the piece that was at the Gardner. I have actually exhibited a few times like afterwards, and I still have that actually in my storage space over here. So, you can see that, there's different things that are different, 3 modules that are stacked on each other, and then there's 9 kind of stacks. So after it's drawn in Rhino, I have to go through all of these kind of hand processes to get to the actual object. And the actual object is definitely far from perfect. So, the idea that, digital fabrication or CAD just like does the work for you is completely not true. Okay, if you want a physical object. So there's so much kind of like knowledge and experience that really has to come into it for that thing to come into the physical world. So I'm just going to check the time a little bit. I think we're kind of okay. So residencies actually have been like a really huge part of my career. I would really, suggest that to anybody kind of coming out of undergrad or actually graduate school. And I know that, not everybody can like, take off like several months to go to a residency or something like that. But, sometimes the opportunity does come up to, do it, even though it's like a few weeks or even 2 weeks to do a residency. But this was the first residency that I did in Europe at the European Ceramic Work Center. And I did receive a grant to go there. So I was there for like 3 months, and I made a piece that was based on these macarnas. So they're actually these scalloped kind of niches. I showed a slide actually right at the beginning of my presentation of these scalloped niches. So I wanted to actually interpret this in kind of a new and kind of contemporary way. So you can see these macarnas here. So they're very kind of complicated objects, and it's very interesting how it all kind of comes together because the 3-dimensional form becomes ornamentation in itself. So this is the process that I had gone through. So it's a dry piece of plaster and it's put onto a CNC machine. And you can see on the right here, each of these, they're actually different circles that are attached there, but I cut off the attachments. So all the pieces are basically slip cast and actually joined together on a setter. So that's the next slide here. So it's this bun-like form, and the bun-like form just gets like thrown away, basically. But it's used to kind of assemble the piece, and you can see the piece after it's popped off of this bun on the bottom. So definitely looking at it now, I could have done it way better, a different technique. But at that time, this is what, I used to solve that problem that I had. So this is actually the way that I still work with this way, is to fire high. Technically, you call it a high bisque. So the first firing was at cone 6, which is a mid fire, and then I glaze low at cone 04. So basically, this form is completely like, fired to a high temperature, and it won't lose its shape once you put glaze on it, and then you do it at a low firing. So this is the finished piece here. So to get that kind of shape, there's like one bowl in the middle, then it goes to a ring of 2, and then it goes to a ring of 3, really to create this undulation. So really taking this form of mukarnas and then, making it really like completely lattice-like, so you could almost like see through it. Obviously, like looking down into it was really interesting. So, I think the use of lattices really does this almost deconstruction of what architecture is, because architecture is usually very like, solid. And obviously very opaque, like you can't pass through it. But through using these lattices, you create this very like kind of open and very, aesthetically pleasing form. So here's another picture of it, just of 8 here. And so you can see this kind of light kind of passing through it. So the idea of kind of shadow and light to kind of like enhance this aesthetic experience is also very important to me as well. So this slide I put in to make a comparison between the Jali screen, which you can see on the left, and then also the wireframe structure that you see on the right. So when you draw in CAD, actually there's these lines that actually create these objects. And then if you change it to another view setting, right, then it has a quote unquote skin over it, but then it looks like a whole volume. So looking at really that wireframe structure and making a comparison to the Jali screen is kind of really interesting because you don't really think about the wireframe structure as an aesthetic object onto itself. But it is a structure, like the truss that I'd shown like right at the beginning, these type of wireframe structures, they're really completely functional, but they can also be very beautiful as well. So getting here, actually, this is in China. So before I came to UNT, to my current job, I worked for 2 years in China at the Central Academy of Fine Arts. And at that time, Alfred had an affiliation with one of the departments there. So in that department, it's still going on, but I don't think the affiliation with Alfred is going on anymore. So that particular ceramic department really existed in the city design department, which was basically designed for more like, I think like household kind of things, that you would use in your home, as I kind of understood it. For the 2 faculty members there, actually, they both got their MFAs at Alfred, and then basically they returned to teach in China at this school. So it's a very large school. There's 3 campuses in Beijing, and this particular campus, I think it was new when I came. So they just opened it up, and it was really on the edge of Beijing. And so this actually experience I like to put in my presentation because it was a really big kind of personal and professional learning experience. So my heritage is Chinese, but obviously pretty much my whole life I grew up in North America. So I was exposed to a little bit through my parents, and obviously Vancouver has a lot of Chinese kind of influence as well. But going to like China as an adult, I was like 35 when I went. And the only other time I'd been to China was like 2 years old, like in Hong Kong, which is technically a very, very different type of culture. So, I got to learn a lot about like, my own heritage, about ceramics in China. So it was an amazing experience. At times it was very difficult and very challenging for me. even though I did learn some Chinese when I was young. But, it's just really quite amazing, the kind of whole history of ceramics in China, and how what their attitudes are towards it and how they continue to create with ceramics as well. So I don't know if I have another more of Jingdezhen on the next slide here, but on the bottom kind of right here, you'll see students actually that are at a small kind of factory, kind of like a cottage, I think some more home factory, of a man that was making like lighting fixtures. So, people could go to Jingdezhen and actually like, commission artisans or, ask smaller companies to actually make their work for them, or like you could design something and ask them to make it. So I think every spring, actually, the students from CAFA, and then I would go with them to Jingdezhen, and they would spend maybe about 6 weeks or I think a month to actually make a project, right? So this was actually a really amazing. Oh, I don't have another slide of that, but this was really amazing because, like, here in North America, we don't have that kind of history, but then we also don't have these kind of resources as well. So yeah, it was very interesting to see kind of how that relationship and how that dynamic was as well. So also when I was there, I got to go to Hong Kong, where my parents are from. And again, a completely different, like, kind of environment than China, so different, very westernized. And so it was just really amazing to see the city where my parents had grown up. And it's a very crowded city, it's very metropolitan. And you can see actually it's my grandfather and my great uncle, their graves are here at the bottom as well. So I'll try to go a little bit quicker through this. I don't know exactly. Uh, I'll try to go a little bit faster through this. So this is actually the graduation show at CAFA. So you can see that on the right, this student had worked with like a factory, right? So they did the design, possibly printed the shape, and then it asked them to cast it as well. Oh yeah, so here's some picture of Jingdezhen of the students working. So they could, actually, do some ceramic work on their own, or they could ask the factory to make it as well. This was the show that I did at the pottery workshop. So this is the first time that I had actually started working with tiles and this idea of slice form. So the bottom left here, you can see this bowl-like form, right? So it was actually all of these tiles that were fired separately, very high, actually past cone 10. They fire very hot in China. And then actually I would slot it together and like fuse everything together with a low fire glaze. But also working in China, I mostly just worked with white porcelain and then just a clear glaze because I didn't really want to deal with much else with the glazes. So just in terms of the technicality of it, it's very, very different than North America. Okay. So yeah, just some more pictures of that. You can see here, lattices that are basically slotted together. And again, you can see here what I was talking about, that basically ornamentation and structure, ornament and structure are basically one and the same thing, right? So really, this structure cannot really exist without the ornamentation. More kind of production of that work, you'll see here the tiles that are fired on a shrink slab because it all has to kind of shrink together as one. Otherwise, it might warp and crack. Oops, sorry. This kind of getting stacked into the kiln here. You can see things are being supported as the next tile is being slotted down into it. So this is coming to quite recent work, probably in the last, maybe this is about 3 years ago, I think, or close to that. So since I've been, the last 6 years here in Texas, I've been doing a variety of things, but I also have been doing this kind of larger hanging kind of piece. So the idea that, creating an architectural space that you could like walk into is very interesting to me, versus just looking at, a smaller type of object. So the idea that, you can be kind of surrounded by ceramics somehow, or like, be within a space. And then I'm really interested in, people walking into the space and having like a moment of kind of contemplation as well. Okay. So just two slides of where I work. So I work at the University of North Texas. And then actually we moved to a new facility probably about 3 years ago now. So you can see kind of some of our facility here and then also our electric kiln. So we're a pretty big department. We have two full-time faculty, one including myself, and then also Brooks Oliver, who is the other person here. So yeah, we have a really good department, a digital fabrication lab, and also a textile fab lab. So really, like when I started at the school, there was like really kind of an emphasis in including these types of techniques into the school or into the curriculum as well. So we also have a graduate program as well. If anyone is ever interested, I always do a little plug for the school in my presentations. But you know, I have really enjoyed it here, and it's a really good cohort of graduate students. We have a very big graduate class. So just in the Department of Studio Art, I think we have about 38 graduate students. That's including like ceramic sculpture, and then new media and as such. So more work here actually at a residency that I did in Minneapolis, so the Northern Clay Center. So, you know, at this time, actually, you know, before I was working with really tiles and, you know, slotting them together to create like a three-dimensional form, right? But now actually, I'm really interested in creating like a volume and kind of a mass. Obviously, it looks like it's like a closed box. So this kind of interior structure has been really been evolving and kind of ongoing. So you can see that the interior structure right now is pretty simple, right? And then basically all the sides of the box have been put onto it. So it is like, you know, very like kind of more of a thing rather than a skeleton that you had seen before. Sorry. Um, so that first one was a little bit of a test, and then this one is the kind of bigger one that you see here. So also the idea of, you know, taking these lattice forms and making them into non-planar forms. So the little kind of circle that you see kind of in the middle, that's been actually attached into the tile form there. So I'm still like, you know, playing with that idea, you know, making a lattice kind of, it doesn't have to be flat, but it's still like a little bit tricky because usually it doesn't really want to bend very much in like that way and bend like in both ways. Yeah. So more about my process. I do 3D printing and mold making, so 3D printing and casting. So you can see on the left here that I print actually in separate parts, right? And then I put them together, and then the whole thing is cast. So that's how I really get around not having to really like have a ginormous like printer or use a CNC machine to make like a ginormous kind of pattern. Is that if everything is printed in elements, it can come together and make a larger form. So I just put this in if anyone is not really so familiar with 3D printing. So 3D printing is actually when like filament, it's a plastic filament, goes through and it feeds through a tube down into the kind of print head there. And then like it's basically like toothpaste, you know, it squeezes out. The plastic needs to be heated up to actually, you know, come out and attach to the next layer. And then it builds up its form. So this is something that actually I do quite a lot actually in my teaching in some sort of manner. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So I think it was actually, this is quite a while now, but I did a very long, extensive trip for about a semester. That was not this fall, but the fall before that. So I feel like it has been maybe about a year and a half, or maybe a bit more than that now. But so I did a lot of residencies and a lot of different things in that fall semester. And it was partially because I got a grant from the Canada Council to do a residency at the Benyamini Ceramic Center, which is in Tel Aviv. So, you know, at that time, uh, COVID happened. So actually that particular residency was delayed about 2 years. So, and then there was a bunch of things that kind of happened like after that, because like, you know, I had applied for another residency in Germany, which also didn't happen because of COVID. So then I reapplied and then I got that to happen during that semester. And then I was accepted to the Indian Ceramics Triennale. And then there was another residency that was also like attached to that. So like everything kind of happened like, within those 5 months because it was delayed. So, I spent about like kind of 5 weeks in Tel Aviv, and there was two ladies that kind of took me, and then there was another two residents kind of around um, Tel Aviv, and we did go to Jerusalem, which was really quite amazing. You can see here actually on the right and on the bottom, there's a wall that's around Jerusalem. And then inside of that wall, there's actually four kind of denominations. I think it was a Judaism, Christianity, there was Muslim, and then there was, I think it was Armenian, that were all within this wall. They call it the Old City. And then also on the top here, it's like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, uh, where they believe that where Jesus was buried. So, and then on the left, which is not as quite related, but it was a very ancient kind of cave here where they ground actually olive oil. So, going there actually, it was a huge really influence on me because obviously, like in my work, I talk a lot about sacred spaces, but I've never been able to really see like a lot of these sacred spaces that I have actually referenced in my work. So that was like, very interesting because you really can't separate the culture from its people. You can if you just like look at books and pictures online, but like, when you're there, you become very much aware of, that the picture is really much more bigger and much more complex than that. So, um, yeah, I mean, that was a really big influence on me when I went there. So actually, probably close to the end of the residency, actually the war broke out. And it was like really quite a tense experience because the director of the residency, like that morning, I got a text from her and she said, call me when you wake up. And then I like talked to her on the phone and she basically said like, this is happening. And later on, like, I left the next day. So it was really quite eye-opening. Like I think in North America as well, like we are actually living in a very safe environment. But really, when you're in that situation, it's quite frightening. So so it's a bit of the work that I had made there at the Benyamini Center. So the idea of kind of, making a lattice form kind of curved in two different ways, I was kind of experimenting with that. On the left, you can see that, I kept that inner part of that lattice and I cut it out so I could keep that shape. This was the show that happened for my work, and this was after I left. So they were good enough to put up that show, and then we did an online talk after that. I also spent some time in Turkey, quite a lot of time actually in Turkey, because after the war broke out, I went there 1 week earlier. And then I had actually spent about a week there before I went to Tel Aviv. And I got to see like all this Iznik tile and all the mosques as well, which was also really amazing because I'd only seen these in books. So, there was a lot of things that I didn't realize, about these spaces. Like these mosques are actually technically it's like one large room. There's a very big courtyard, and then you go into kind of like very one large kind of room. But the ornamentation is just obviously it's like spectacular. Um, you see all these tiles which are just like, just your eyes just become really kind of dizzy looking at them as well. Oop, okay. So yeah, this is the blue mosque here. So part of the top is actually painted plaster, and then probably like a lot of the things that are more lower from there are actually tiled. So the whole entire thing is not tiled. There's a lot of other kind of decorative elements of that as well. So I could talk more about this, but I don't think I'm going to go into too much of a depth. But the Hagia Sophia, which is actually across from the mosque here, it used to actually be a Christian basilica. And so, actually off of that historical style, they started building mosques like this. So there is a lot of kind of like, cultural exchange in terms of architectural styles. So while I was there, actually, I got to visit two universities within Turkey. I had actually shown with Emre, who's in the top left here, at the Virginia Muckler Ceramics Biennale. So, I knew I was going to Turkey and I got in touch with him, and then I met a lot of other people besides that. But I would really recommend, if anyone has, time to travel through Turkey, it is really amazing for ceramics. And really amazingly, they have some very good ceramic departments. They make art, but then they are very industrial focused because there is a lot of ceramic factories that are there. So the ability kind of just to see these factories and that relationship was really quite amazing. My residency that I did in Germany, that was, I think, about maybe 7 weeks. So I was accepted to that before COVID, obviously, and I reapplied and I was accepted. So I did that residency the same time as Alina Titain, who is from Latvia, as you can see here. So we lived and worked in this small house. And it was about, I think, like an hour from Hamburg as well. So that's some of her work and my work on the bottom. The Indian Ceramics Triennale. So this was an incredibly amazing experience. And of all the experiences that I had during those like 5 months, this one was like took the cake. India was crazy, but it was really an amazing place, but it was crazy. So basically, they told me like we don't want to ship any work. It's too like expensive and like too complicated to ship work. So why don't you just come over here and do a residency and make the work, and then we'll show it. So that's like how it happened. So I spent about, I think it was 4 weeks making some work there that was based on the stepwell. So this is me and then also the faculty that were there. So they do both ceramics and glass, but it's a very, very interesting school. So the National Institute of Design was partially founded by Ray and Charles Eames, or they were advisors to set up the school. So really the focus is on like, design of like kind of objects. And then, I don't know if they have architecture as well, but, different types and textile design that's really big actually as well. So sorry. So again, seeing the ceramic culture of India was amazing. Up on the top kind of left, that's the piece one of the pieces that I did for the Indian Ceramics Triennale. So I was really interested in interpreting a stepwell into the lattice form. So obviously also they have jali screens. Like there are these very lattice screens in the moss that are on the sort of north part of India. So that was also a really huge influence on that. So here is you can see some jali screens at a mosque on the left. There's a stepwell on the right. So a lot of the times, like a stepwell, it's actually in a sacred space, like it's in front of a temple, and water is obviously like a life-giving source as well. But there's many different kind of styles of what a stepwell is. It's also an extremely diverse country. So, people from the north versus the south, they talk completely different dialects. Apparently, there is no national language, so, a lot of them use English to actually talk to each other as well. So this is the Indian Ceramics Triennale. There was artists from all over the world, but mostly, obviously, Indian artists that were part of this. So it was really fantastic to see this work. And there's only a couple more slides here, but more recently, actually last summer, I did do a residency at the Watershed Center for Ceramic Arts. We had probably, I think maybe 15 people or so that worked with digital techniques and clay that came in to make work. So this woman, Jackie, she 3D printed these lattice forms and she put them on the slab roller and just basically compressed them. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, okay. And then also I did a residency in China at the Shangyu Celadon International Center. So, I used a lot of my lattice forms, and then, these are two actually historical ceramic forms that I referenced. So that was actually the first time that I'd gone back there in like about 5 years as well. So this is a project that I'm currently working on. So I'm making actually like a large lattice screen that you could actually walk into. So it's almost like a little bit like a long kind of hallway. But it's a little different than the other one that I did because I do want it to have almost these little kind of slots as you kind of go down. So having the wall kind of having a little bit more of a depth. And then also like the decoration on this one is obviously very kind of Asian inspired as well. So it's taking that, all what I've learned in kind of the first large hanging piece I did and then kind of inserting in this. So this is ongoing. So I hope this gives you kind of a general overview of my whole career. It's been a long time. I'm glad that I had a chance to do another talk like this. That's amazing. I just say huge thank you to everybody for attending, and also the Northwest Ceramics Foundation, but also definitely to Amy. I have to give like a really huge shout out because she has been really like this extremely good mentor to me over many years now. Many, many years. So, thank you for all that advice that you've given to me. I really do appreciate that. So sorry. This is actually my information here. That website is actually wrong. That should not have a dash in the middle there. So it's just one word, elizaau.com. But if you do need to get in touch with me, you can see my email there and also my Instagram. So thank you very much. I think we might have a chance to do maybe a few questions. I know I kind of went a little long, but I would be happy to talk a little longer. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. And I am I am got a bad memory. I am now confused because I think you just said Elisa, but you do want Eliza.
No, she wants Elisa.
You want
I will respond to both, but yeah, you
want to get it right.
that's okay. That's okay. Grammatically corrected, yes, it is Eliza. So
So, so what do you like?
Elisa.
oh, Elisa would be great. Yeah, thank you.
That I will. Okay, that's great. Uh, Thank you so much. And thank you, Amy, because we know you've been keeping track. We all have been keeping track of what you've been doing for years, because it is so complex. And frankly, it's mind-boggling to me. It's wonderful Amy has been there, working sort of alongside her, keeping track of what's going on. Um, I really liked your comments on how structure and ornamentation are so profoundly combined. I think that's something very, very interesting to me. So I am hoping that people will now ask some questions, and we have lots of time. There's no rush, and carry on this conversation. So let's open it up to other folks.
And
So, the mic's turned on.
Elisa, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. That last piece, it looked from your model that it was like the size of a football field. I'm wondering what was the scale?
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God.
No, yeah, it's well, it's still large, but it's not actually that as tall as the other one, but it's like the 30 feet by 10 feet. So it's 10
Well,
feet
that's
at
pretty
the
big.
feet. So it is sizable. But yeah, I mean it takes like about well, I started it a while ago now, but probably about a year in production it's
Oh,
going to take. The other one before the large hang piece was about 2 years.
oh.
So it's kind of like bit by bit.
And
As much as possible, I try to do like a large piece and then a smaller one. Right now this piece, like the time frame for it is like very, very compressed right now. Generally for larger pieces, I do like to take about 2 years, to do that. So.
and does it have color? I couldn't tell whether that was an artificial color, the yellow and the blue, or is
Yes,
it
it does have color. It's actually going to be kind of more greenish, but the color is just actually to designate the planes. So
right?
there's
That's what
one
I,
plane
yeah.
like I guess straight up and down, then there's another plane that goes interior, and then there's one that's like flat. So this was really just to figure out, how many pieces I need and things like that. And so what is really nice in CAD is that like each like section is technically a block. So like the program can basically tell me how many blocks I need. Like it counts it. So I can like tell. So but anyways, this particular form is about 700 pieces.
Oh my God.
The one that I had done before with the blue hanging one was about 200, I think, something like that. So it is sizable, but it's not quite as tall. I think it's about 5 feet, but it hangs, so it's a little bit taller than that.
But I was wondering, with the scale of these, are there opportunities to have them permanently installed?
I would like to. I don't. I've not had that opportunity yet. That would be
I
nice.
think I think we should work
But
on that because
yeah,
that kind of work and then to have to take it all down and move it or store
yeah,
it, it seems like it would be absolutely beautiful just installed as a permanent structure somewhere.
yeah. I mean, I'd love to have that at some point. I don't know. I have written a few, like, not for this piece, but public art proposals before. And then we've only had one that is successful. Like usually me and my husband kind of do that together. There is actually like a condo in Richmond. This is actually over like probably like over 10 years ago that we finished that. So it's off of I think Granville. And then for that one actually we just gave them design and then they did like literally like everything else. Like and so they it was laser cut steel or something like that. And so that was installed there. But yeah, I mean I'd like to. I mean it's like less room and storage to
Yeah,
take care of. So yeah.
it's beautiful.
Store it. How do you store a work like this? I mean, how do you, I mean, how do you manage?
Pack it all up, I guess.
Yeah, packet. So
Wow. I wonder if fragility has a lot to do with hesitancy about permanent public installations in that they worry that somebody will, you know, go against, smack against it and break
yeah,
some part of the wall.
right. Yeah, I'm sure that's definitely you know, a factor in it as well, that it's really fragile. I mean, it would be more durable if it was translated into metal or like laser cut metal or something like that. Then it would be a lot more sturdier. Um, yeah, but I'm sure, you know, that is a consideration.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about why it's important for you to make them out of ceramic because you have worked in other materials. What is it about ceramic that makes you want to make these incredibly large, complicated structures out of probably the most difficult material that you could possibly work with?
Yeah. Um, yeah, you know, I think like I was always really attracted to ceramics because it was so technical and it was really difficult. So I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I need to figure out if it is in clay, and I think I enjoy that challenge. It's also like clay is a very architectural form. I mean, I like, you know, stone and glass, and I guess metal is also architectural. But there is a certain kind of aesthetic kind of feeling about clay that is really quite lovely. Probably, you know, you control like the color in like a certain way that you can't with other materials. But you know, I enjoy the challenge. You know, some of the stuff that I've done, you know, obviously has been very difficult. But I think if it was like, you know, I just decided to laser cut it out of paper or something like that, it just wouldn't be like the same,
Right.
I think. You know, I think it's always like in a dialogue with the material. And you know, that kind of conversation or that kind of like, you know, fighting with the material is really part of the practice. You know, it's something that I don't think I'll ever get tired of. You know, it's just that, you know, this idea of kind of problem solving is kind of like very interesting in it itself. Um, yeah, and I know people just really see the finished product, but it's very interesting to go through the whole process of kind of designing it and like troubleshooting it and like, you know, and one thing really builds on the other one, as I kind of mentioned. So, you know, doing the first kind of hanging piece, and I learned a whole lot from that, and then like, you know, doing the second piece. So it never really comes out of like, you know, thin air. So,
Because
yeah.
one thing I noticed is that even though a lot of the pieces are huge, up close, they're just absolutely as beautiful as you would expect, a ceramic piece that you would hold in your hand to be. And the fact that it translates from something very large to something very intimate is something that maybe is quite unique to ceramics that is really
Yeah,
part of the materiality that's quite amazing.
yeah, that's interesting to see. So,
I think
yeah.
it's beautiful. Now, Carly Slade has raised a hand.
Hi, Carly. Yeah, I see your video there.
Hey,
So
how's it going?
good. Nice to see you
Long time
again.
no see.
Saw
You
your video
too.
there. I was like, hey, hi.
Got to
Yeah,
support your Canadian friends.
thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious what percentage of loss you get in the kiln. But like I've also seen you work and it's super perfect, but like if you need 100 tiles, are you making like 150 or what?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So actually for some of the more complicated forms, like there was one that I showed at NCCA when it was in Cincinnati. There's a box. But actually some of the work, the smaller work, actually I build it um like I build it first, just to see if it will stand up. So like I do the whole build, like I build it like to like scale, like the thing, but I don't clean up all the holes. And then I'll fire it to cone 6. And then I'll see like kind of what will happen to it. And then if it is okay, then actually then I build the whole thing again and then I clean it up and then I fire it and then that's the actual thing. So like technically I make the same piece more than once. Like the box thing that I made, I think I made it like 3 times or something like that. So pieces are made like over again. Because like when with the pieces made and it's, and then there's a failure, I'm like, okay, it failed. So I'm gonna build it again. And then I don't know, maybe some changes has been made. So it's basically like making the same piece over again. In terms of like failures, this kind of larger pieces, I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of like, in the kiln and then it like fails. Like I mean like there are pieces that have cracks and things in them. But like the number of pieces that I'm making, I just take those kind of ones out. So yeah, and so it is over kind of a long period of time and like making things kind of over again. Because the smaller pieces are kind of more like one-off. um they're not they aren't made in a great production. So the bowl kind of form that I had showed like before, maybe I made like 3 of those kind
Hmm.
of thing, so but it's never like it fails and then like that's it, I'm not going back to that because I usually stick with it until something comes out something comes out. They're like, yeah, but or something has to get changed in some sort of way. But the smaller pieces, I think, like, technically I make about 4 a year. So if it was the smaller pieces, so the amount of time that it takes to like design it and then 4 designs a year. So that kind of like time lapse about like 4 months to make kind of one piece is a series of different things kind of happening. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool to see all the places you've been. You've been around.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been around, yeah. Yeah, where are you now?
I'm teaching at NASCAD.
You teach in NASCAD. Oh, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is
How
some
is
like
it?
weird circular
Sorry.
stuff. Huh?
We could have like a longer conversation about this, but I please say hello to Rory and whoever is there now, because some people I don't know actually. I do know Rory, so yeah, because
Yeah,
there's some
Rory's still
change.
kicking around. I will.
That's great. Awesome. Glad that you're there. Might be fun. Must be fun. So great. Yeah.
So, do we have any more questions? Is there anything in the chat that I've missed? I think not. So there is information in the chat for you guys to look at, and this is has been recorded. So Lisa had put up, about right. Lisa had put up some information so you can go back to the recording and you can take
Yeah,
note.
go back to that if you would like. Yeah. Yeah, you can always reach out to me on Instagram, or there's my email website, just take out the little dash there. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me whenever you would like, or you can add me to your Instagram. I do try to get back to Vancouver like every year, kind of around Christmas time. So maybe I will see people if they're around at that time. So,
Let
but
us,
I don't get back there that often.
yeah, let us know
So
if you come back so that we can do a get together. That would be lovely.
yeah, that would be very nice. So
All right?
yeah, a lot of things have changed. So
Yes.
yeah, in the
Hasn't
years. So yeah, I've been away for a while.
it?
It's always nice to hear back from people in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So
Congratulations on uh, such a fabulous body of work and
yeah,
so many investigations. And I'm still trying to think about how you actually put them together. And uh, thank you for giving us the time today. And thank you everyone for attending. And unless there's another question, I will end the meeting. Everybody happy?
thank you.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you to everybody. Yeah, yeah,
Bye-bye.
great. Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye, Yunwei. Okay, bye.